just happened. We just found out that Charlie Kirk got shot.
It's fucking awful.
And is he dead?
Joe Rogan just dropped a jaw-dropping revelation about Erika Kirk, and trust me, this one's wild. The details he shared have everyone questioning how her entire background slipped under the radar for so long. We're talking about strange behavior, whispers of questionable connections, and the shocking part, how she suddenly rose to become the CEO of Turning Point USA. It's got people everywhere saying, how did nobody see this coming? Because looking back now, Erika's rise feels like one giant flashing warning sign. Then came the event that changed everything. September 10th, 2025. That single day sent shockwaves through American politics. The unexpected loss of Charlie Kirk, founder of Turning Point USA, wasn't just heartbreaking. It was like, brain, it tore through the nation's core. At first, the reports out of that university event sounded tragic enough, but as the days passed, the story twisted into something far more complicated and unsettling. What began as a simple report started turning into a tangled web that pulled in powerful figures, raised major questions, and left the entire country wondering what was really happening behind the scenes. When the news first hit, the reaction was instant and emotional. Across the country, people froze in disbelief. On his podcast, Joe Rogan captured that raw moment of shock that so many others were feeling. His reaction wasn't polished or planned. It was pure frustration and disgust at the dark corners of the internet where some were actually celebrating what had happened to Charlie. Rogan didn't hold back as he called out the twisted culture that could find joy in something so tragic. But as that first wave of horror started to fade, his attention shifted, just like everyone else's. The story stopped being only about what happened that night. It started becoming about the aftershock, the strange moves, the odd behavior, and the sudden changes from the people closest to Charlie. Power began shifting faster than anyone could make sense of, and the details coming out didn't line up neatly. Soon, the question no one wanted to ask became impossible to ignore. Why does nothing about this feel right?
If you want people to lose all faith that anyone is going to solve anything, you add a bunch of, if you're going to kill a guy, you add a bunch of other wacky shit that doesn't make any sense and you spam it out there at the same time. You leave a gun that didn't do it.
What started as a tragic story quickly turned into something much bigger. A mystery that pulled in politics, loyalty, and betrayal. The hunt for answers turned into a hunt for the truth itself. And when the focus narrowed down, all eyes landed squarely on one person. Erika Kirk. Right after the tragedy, instead of stepping away from the spotlight, Erika went straight toward it. She jumped on Instagram, sharing emotional videos of herself crying beside Charlie's casket. The footage spread everywhere, millions of views, endless reposts, and waves of sympathy flooding in from people who saw her pain as real and raw. But for others, something about it just didn't sit right. Some felt uneasy watching those deeply personal moments being filmed and shared so soon. The question began to echo online. Was this heartfelt grief or a carefully crafted image? People started whispering that maybe it was less about mourning and more about maintaining control over the public story. And just when the conversation seemed to be cooling down, Erika made a move that sent social media into overdrive. Only 3 days later, during the massive memorial service for Charlie held at the State Farm Stadium in Arizona, an event packed with thousands of mourners, she walked in. But it wasn't quiet. It wasn't modest. Her entrance would be the moment that had everyone talking for weeks. What unfolded next felt less like a moment of mourning and more like a full-on spectacle. Erika arrived to the thunder of pyrotechnics and loud triumphant music, a scene that looked more like the grand entrance of a wrestling champion than a widow stepping into her husband's memorial. The whole production left people stunned, unsure how to even process what they were seeing. Within minutes, social media blew up. Viewers online drew harsh comparisons to over-the-top entertainment events, calling it tone-deaf and surreal. But what really turned the atmosphere icy was the backlash that came from inside Charlie's own circle. Those closest to him were reportedly furious, calling the whole thing disrespectful and unnatural for such a heartbreaking occasion. And then came the move that made everyone's jaws drop. Erika Kirk was officially announced as the new CEO of Turning Point USA just 72 hours after Charlie's passing. Yes, in only 3 days, she went from being seen as the devastated widow at a high-production memorial to leading one of the country's most powerful political organizations.
Right.
Out in the woods. You do a bunch of shit like that.
You have an old man put his dick out and yell, I did it, I did it, I did it.
Yeah, you get some kid who has a boyfriend who's a furry, and you
boyfriend is a
talk to him on
furry?
Discord.
That lightning-fast transition sent shockwaves through the entire movement. To many, it didn't look like a random decision made out of urgency. It looked like a plan that had been waiting to unfold. Critics couldn't shake the suspicion that her rise had been prepared long before the tragedy even happened. Was this a coincidence or something orchestrated behind closed doors? This was the moment when commentators like Joe Rogan started digging even deeper. On his show, he encouraged his massive audience to stop accepting surface-level stories and to start asking real questions. The official narrative, he argued, didn't add up. Everything seemed to be happening at such breakneck speed that nobody had time to think critically. The inconsistencies were piling up and the timing felt way too neat to be natural. But that wasn't all. Another piece of the puzzle had people even more uneasy. The complete absence of Charlie's parents from the massive memorial service. Cameras showed every tear, every speech, every moment of production, except Robert and Catherine Kirk. Their seats were empty, their names unmentioned, their presence erased from what was supposed to be a celebration of their son's legacy. That silence spoke volumes. Were they too heartbroken to attend, or were they intentionally left out of the public eye? Some began to whisper that perhaps they had been pushed aside by a new team eager to control the message. Suddenly, what was once seen as a tragic organizational transition started to look more like a quiet takeover, a power shift unfolding right before everyone's eyes. Whispers turned into full-blown chatter as people tried to piece together what really happened behind the closed doors of Turning Point USA after Charlie's passing. Every hour seemed to bring new rumors, and every rumor somehow pointed back to Erika Kirk. Her sudden promotion wasn't just surprising anymore, it was suspicious. Insiders began leaking bits and pieces suggesting that the transition had been far too smooth for something so tragic and unexpected. According to some close to the organization, there had already been quiet talks about restructuring weeks before the tragedy. Those meetings, once brushed off as standard planning sessions, now looked eerily strategic. Certain board members claimed they were told to prepare for leadership adjustments, but were never told why. And suddenly, in hindsight, everything made sense. Or at least it seemed to. Employees started noticing changes too. Just days before the tragedy, key documents were quietly moved, emails deleted, and certain security files locked behind new passwords. Then, like clockwork, Erika stepped in as if she had been ready all along. The press release announcing her appointment was polished, formatted, and distributed to major outlets within hours. Who prepares something that fast unless it was already sitting in a draft folder? Even more chilling were the reports about the board meeting that made her official. Sources claimed it wasn't a democratic vote at all. It was more like a coronation. Some members allegedly felt pressure to approve her without hesitation, told it was what Charlie would have wanted, but several insiders have since whispered that Charlie never indicated such a plan. In fact, he had reportedly been rethinking several leadership roles entirely. So if Charlie had doubts about his leadership circle, why was Erika's takeover treated as his final wish? That's the question everyone was too scared to ask out loud. Meanwhile, Joe Rogan and a handful of other commentators kept digging. On one of his most replayed podcast segments, Rogan dissected Erika's televised interviews and social media posts from that same week. He pointed out inconsistencies in her body language, moments where her emotions didn't match her words. One second, she appeared heartbroken. The next, she was confidently discussing organizational strategy and future plans. Viewers couldn't decide if they were watching grief or ambition. Clips of those interviews began circulating online, fueling endless debates. Some defended her, saying she was just doing her best to stay strong. Others saw it as a performance, a carefully curated image of a leader taking control during chaos. But what really threw fuel on the fire was the footage that emerged from behind the scenes of that very memorial service. A leaked video, allegedly filmed by a stagehand, showed Erika rehearsing her entrance before the ceremony even began. The same pyrotechnics, the same triumphant soundtrack, the same dramatic lighting cues, all timed perfectly. People couldn't believe what they were seeing. Who rehearses a funeral entrance? Commentators called it a PR nightmare disguised as grief. Then came the story about the missing footage from inside the event's control booth. Security logs showed a 12-minute gap in the digital recording of the sound and light systems, the exact window when Erika's dramatic entrance took place. Technicians who worked that day claimed they had no idea why the data disappeared. That missing piece became one of the most discussed mysteries of the entire case. Meanwhile, Charlie's parents remained completely silent. No interviews, no statements, no attendance at public events. Their absence started feeling less like privacy and more like exile. Online online forums exploded with theories that they were being pushed out of their son's legacy. Photos began circulating showing that their access badges to the Turning Point headquarters had been revoked shortly after Erika's appointment. When questioned, the organization dismissed it as a routine security update, but for those paying attention, it felt like another convenient cover story. As days turned into weeks, more cracks began showing in Erika's carefully polished leadership image. Former staffers started anonymously posting claims about tense meetings, disappearing funds, and rewritten agendas. One claimed that entire segments of Charlie's final projects were erased from internal drives. Another said that the new management banned discussion about his final months entirely. Anything that could complicate the official narrative was suddenly off limits. That silence only made people more curious. The internet turned into a giant investigation board, users connecting dots, comparing statements, and analyzing timestamps. Rogan's fans alone built entire threads analyzing every inconsistency in Erika's interviews. One viral post even claimed to find proof that one of her social media clips had been pre-recorded before the tragedy based on subtle differences in her background decor. And while none of this could be confirmed beyond speculation, the growing pile of coincidences was impossible to ignore. Then another bombshell dropped, also the organization's insurance filings. Public records showed that just 2 weeks before the tragedy, Turning Point had quietly updated several key policies, including leadership coverage. One clause highlighted by online sleuths outlined a full payout for sudden and unforeseen loss of the founder. And guess who was listed as the primary beneficiary? Erika Kirk. Critics called it the smoking gun that proved premeditation. Supporters called it a basic safety measure for any major nonprofit. But the timing was impossible to overlook. Even more bizarre was how quickly Erika began reshaping the organization's public message. Longtime followers noticed the tone shifting from Charlie's fiery, hardline energy to something colder, more controlled. Press releases became robotic, photos tightly staged, and spontaneous live events vanished entirely. Within just 1 month, Turning Point USA felt like a completely different entity. Former donors started to distance themselves, sensing trouble, and those who stayed began demanding an internal audit, especially after rumors surfaced about massive consulting expenses that nobody could trace. When reporters tried asking Erika directly, she brushed off the questions, saying, "The focus should be on healing, not drama." But every time she said that, the drama only grew louder. By late October, the situation had spiraled. Hashtags calling for transparency started trending across multiple platforms. Influencers from across the political spectrum began weighing in, some calling it a tragic story of misplaced trust, others labeling it a full-scale cover-up. What united them all was one shared feeling. Something about this didn't feel natural. Meanwhile, Rogan's podcast episodes about the situation kept climbing to the top of the charts. Each time he revisited the story, new witnesses came forward. Former volunteers described strange encounters at the organization's headquarters, people shredding papers late at night, visitors entering through side doors. Every new claim painted the same eerie picture. A place in panic mode, trying desperately to hide something. But the real twist came when one of Charlie's longtime friends, a fellow activist, broke his silence in an emotional interview. He said Charlie had privately voiced concerns about his safety weeks before the tragedy. According to him, Charlie felt cornered, saying he didn't know who to trust anymore. He mentioned major changes coming to the organization, changes he wasn't comfortable with. That revelation reignited everything. Suddenly, Rogan's speculation, the missing footage, the timed promotion, the absent parents, it all started to look connected. People began demanding a full investigation, not just into the event itself, but into the power structure surrounding it. By early November, even mainstream outlets began cautiously covering the story. The tone had shifted from disbelief to suspicion. Commentators weren't asking if something strange was happening anymore. They were asking how deep it went. And right in the center of it all stood Erika Kirk, calm, polished, and eerily unshaken, while the rest of the country debated whether her rise was destiny or design. The transition at Turning Point USA was carried out with lightning speed, so fast and polished that it felt almost too perfect, leaving no space for the raw, messy emotions that come with real loss. But everything truly exploded into a national obsession when Candace Owens stepped into the chaos. Her entrance turned a tense situation into a full-blown spectacle that no one could look away from. Candace dropped a bombshell online, a screenshot from a private group chat that reportedly included Charlie Kirk himself. She admitted she'd been hesitant to reveal it, wanting to protect Charlie's privacy even after his passing. But she claimed that the shifting storylines and the silence she was getting from investigators pushed her to go public. She said she handed everything over to government officials because she refused to stay quiet while the truth was being buried. The second people heard about this secret message, the internet went wild. What did it say? Who was mentioned? And why did Candace have it? The mystery was enough to set social media ablaze. Threads, theories, and breakdown videos started popping up everywhere, all trying to decode a single screenshot that might hold the key to everything. That's when Joe Rogan took things to another level. On his podcast, he connected dots that many hadn't even considered, forming a theory that would completely reshape how people viewed the entire scandal. According to Rogan, the real issue between Candace Owens and Charlie Kirk before his tragic passing wasn't about politics at all. It was about Erika. Sources close to both sides reportedly told Rogan that Candace had been warning Charlie about Erika's growing influence inside Turning Point USA. She allegedly believed Erika was getting too close to major donors and possibly steering financial decisions in questionable ways. Candace, known for being outspoken, tried to alert Charlie, but instead of listening, he started to pull away. Insiders claimed that Erika had begun shaping her own version of events, feeding Charlie a completely different story about Candace's motives. This created a rift that never healed, and when the public finally learned about these behind-the-scenes tensions, it changed everything. The story suddenly stopped being about random tragedy. It started looking like a slow, calculated game of manipulation and control. To Rogan and countless others, this wasn't just a workplace feud. It was a power struggle that may have reached deep into Charlie's personal life. The image forming was that of a man surrounded by competing influences, unsure who to trust, while his organization was being quietly restructured around him. Erika's rise, once seen as a symbol of resilience, now looked more like a takeover built on emotional division. As all this unfolded, Candace Owens didn't back down. In fact, she doubled down. She began calling out federal investigators directly, demanding answers and transparency. On her platforms, she raised tough questions that many people were already whispering. Why the rush to label Tyler Robinson as a lone actor? Why were certain pieces of evidence being drip-fed to the public instead of shared openly? And why were there so many holes in the official timeline? Her relentless push struck a chord with millions who already distrusted the process. Candace's criticism wasn't just about one investigation anymore. It became a rallying cry for anyone who felt that something big was being covered up. She questioned the timing, the missing evidence, and even the way media outlets seemed to echo the same talking points. Rogan amplified these doubts by breaking down every new statement from authorities and every inconsistency in the case. He pointed out that too many key details were getting lost or misinterpreted, and he warned his listeners to pay attention to patterns rather than headlines. The idea that the tragedy was just a random act began to crumble under the weight of unanswered questions. Online communities were now split into camps, those defending Erika, those backing Candace, and those simply wanting the truth, wherever it led. And as the debates grew louder, so did the spotlight. The story was no longer about a single heartbreaking event. It had evolved into a tangled web involving friendship, betrayal, ambition, and secrecy at the highest levels. By the time Rogan wrapped his latest segment on the subject, his tone said it all. This wasn't just gossip or internet noise anymore. It was a national mystery fueled by contradictions, lost footage, missing witnesses, and an uncomfortable truth no one seemed ready to face. Something about it all just didn't add up. And deep down, everyone knew it. In just a few short weeks, the world watched Erika Kirk evolve from a grieving partner into a powerful public figure, a CEO suddenly commanding an influence she never held before. The same movement that once stood united behind Charlie Kirk has now splintered into factions, each side pointing fingers, each one claiming to hold the truth. The divide runs deep, and the silence surrounding it speaks even louder. Charlie's parents have chosen to stay quiet, their absence still haunting those who remember how close they once were to their son's mission. Former friends and longtime allies have started to quietly pull away from Turning Point USA under Erika's leadership. What was once a tightly connected network has started to crumble, replaced by caution, confusion, and suspicion. And what makes it all feel even more surreal is how major public figures have responded, or rather, how they haven't. Some of the most outspoken voices in the political world have remained eerily silent about Erika's rapid rise. To many, that quietness feels deliberate, almost strategic. Now, what remains is an unsettling picture. A woman who, whether by fate or careful planning, has turned personal tragedy into unprecedented public power. What was once seen as heartbreak has now become a blueprint for influence. She has, in many eyes, transformed a national tragedy into an opportunity for control, and that's what has left millions struggling with the same haunting question: was this destiny or design? The story of Charlie Kirk is no longer just about a life lost too soon. It's become a layered, controversial tale of ambition, optics, and power, where the performance of grief seems to blur with the pursuit of influence. Joe Rogan's doubts, echoed across millions of listeners, capture exactly what people are feeling deep down. A mix of disbelief, discomfort, and suspicion about how fast everything changed and how perfectly it all seemed to fall into place. Because at its core, this isn't just a story about one person's rise. It's about what that rise represents. How far would someone go when tragedy and ambition collide? What kind of mindset turns heartbreak into strategy? And what happens to the legacy of the person who's no longer here to speak for themselves? For so many, the answer feels clear, even if it's never said out loud. The conservative movement that Charlie helped build now stands divided, unsure of who to trust and haunted by the shadow of what really went on behind closed doors. His legacy, once a symbol of unity and purpose, now lives on as one of the most controversial, debated, and heartbreaking stories in modern politics. So what do you think really happened here? Was Erika's rise a twist of fate, or was it something much more deliberate? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear every theory, every opinion, every detail you've noticed. And while you're here, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with someone who's been following the story, and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.